Now, we've been talking about different sources of capital that a company has. And we've gone through bonds and we've gone through preferred stocks. Now we're going to talk about common stock. Now, common stock is the type of stock that you would buy if indeed you want to own the company. You want to control all the decision making. You want to control the cash flow of the company. If you want control now, you need to own common stock. So one reason people buy common stock is they want to be an owner. They want to control the cash flow and the investment decisions and all the rest of the company. The other thing about common stock now is that it's part of equity. You'll recall in earlier videos now we talked about equity being common stock plus retained earnings. Indeed, common stock plus retained earnings is what's known as owner's equity. Common stock, often referred to as external equity, that is, we sell some new shares of common stock, people buy those shares, they're outside the company, and we get the money for that. That's outside equity. Retained earnings, of course, we refer to this as internal equity. This is money that we, the owners, earned and we possess, but we don't take it out in the form of dividends, but rather retain it in the firm. That's internal equity. But these two things together gives you owner's equity. Why do investors buy common stock? It's typically not because of the dividends that a common stock pays. Rather, they're looking for capital gains. They want to buy low, sell high. Lots of investors now, they would rather have capital gains than dividends because dividends have to be reported as income and they're taxed as income. Capital gains now, they're taxed at a lower tax rate, a capital gains tax rate, and indeed, they like the tax advantage of the capital gains. Just like we did with bonds, just like we did with preferred stock, we're going to talk about the intrinsic value of common stock. How do you calculate the intrinsic value of common stock? Just like the intrinsic value of any asset now, the intrinsic value of a share of common stock is the present value of all future cash flows. You're about to find out that the cash flow that's going to be relevant in our discussion here is going to be dividends, but be that as it may, the intrinsic value of a share of common stock is the same as the intrinsic value of any asset. It's the present value of all future cash flows. This formula here now was developed by a guy named John Burr Williams in 1934. Now, Williams is known as the father of the dividends theory. I won't bore you with the derivation, but he started off with prices and all kinds of things over here. But what he ended up with was just dividends. And what this would insinuate, of course, is that the only cash flow that's important in the value of common stock is the dividends. P0, that's the price of the stock today, the intrinsic value of the stock today. D1 is the numerator, not D0. D0 is the current dividend. D1 is the next dividend. If you buy common stock today, you don't get the current dividend, you get the next dividend. You have to own the stock, take the risk of ownership for a while, and then you get a dividend. So again, this is not the current dividend, but the next dividend. K is required return. We talked about that in earlier videos. We're going to talk about the capital asset pricing model in a future video here in just a moment. But K is required return. This is your minimum acceptable return on this investment. G is the constant growth model. The constant growth rate rather. So if we put 5% in here, 0.05, that literally means that we expect the earnings and the dividends of the company in the future to grow 5% per year forever. So this is the constant growth rate. Now, Williams developed this model, but after he passed away, a guy named Myron Gordon probably did more work in dividends theory than anything else. And a lot of people refer to this model here as the Gordon model. Some people call it the Williams model. Some people call it the Gordon-Williams model, and students think there's some guy named Gordon Williams. Two different people, Myron Gordon and John Burr Williams. Williams referred to this as the constant growth model. which is what we typically will use to describe this model. And again, this is the basis of what's called the dividends theory. John Burr Williams is the father of the dividends theory. This model here, this dividends theory approach now, if you finish your program and you decide you want to be a chartered financial analyst, and their common body of knowledge now, it's this model